and I'm happy to see you all here. My name is Björn Åstrand, and I am today's chair of this session. I was the first chair of the TP network once, a long time ago. So that's my history here, but I am situated at Umeå University, Sweden. That's where I am. So today we have 3 interesting papers that we will look into, and I hope we will have an interesting discussion on those. This session will be recorded and presentations will later be available on the web. So that could be good to know. And I guess you are all now familiar with the format we use, 50 minutes each for every presentation, followed by short questions of clarification, and then we save space time for a more general discussion in the end. And I hope you're all happy with that model, and that we could use the raise hand function, and where we'd like to have the word in the conversation in the end. I would like to also mention that we have a host. Leah is hosting the session, so she will secure that we are technically on track all the time. So with no further ado, I would like to give the floor to Solveig, which are presenters of the first paper on student-teacher identity development as a transformative learning. Please, Solveig, share your screen and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Björn. I will share my screen to show you our presentation. I wonder if you can see it now.
Yes.
Very good. I'd like to once again say a good afternoon and say that my name is Solveig Cornér. I'm a postdoc researcher at the University of Helsinki, and together with my colleagues Marjo Savijärvi and Hanna Kaihovirta, who are university lecturers, and Professor Erika Löfström, we have prepared a presentation of an article that is ongoing, that we are working with. The name slightly changed during this springtime, so now it is called, as you see, Evolving Professional Identity in Student Teachers' Perceptions. I would like to also say that all of us, we come from the Swedish-speaking elementary school teacher education program at the University of Helsinki. And the teacher education program that we work within has a special emphasis on diversity, multilingualism, and social justice. And we will come back to that later on in the presentation. We are going to start off, and I will give the floor to Erika, who will start. Please, Erika.
Thank you very much. Briefly, a few background points. We've used Sachs' definition for teacher identity, which refers to how professionals construct their sense of self as a professional. So how to be, how to act, how to understand the work and the place in society. And of course, in this context, we are talking about teachers and future teachers. Teacher education needs to support student teacher identity development alongside many other things, those didactical and pedagogical competencies and also subject competencies, but in addition to those, there is sort of an other kind of entity that needs to be nurtured, that has to do with beliefs, attitudes, and so on, mission, vision of being a teacher, and sort of supporting the development of that entity. So our study has been inspired by Korthagen's onion model. You might be familiar with that. In the first title of our presentation, we had the idea of transformative learning, which is sort of associated with the idea of development and change, which is also core of Korthagen's onion model. And so we've been inspired by these ideas as we started to look into change in teacher identity among student teachers. We also align ourselves with the view that identity development is a dynamic and ongoing process. And these ideas in our mind do resonate with what, for instance, Mesirov and others have written about learning as a transformative process. And so what we are trying to do is to understand how student teachers' identity development takes place in this very special context that we have, that Solveig explained. The program has a profile on diversity, multilingualism, and social justice. And these have very much to do with not only knowledge, but also about attitudes and reflection and understanding what you think about these things and where you stand in terms of values and valuing these things. So we are thinking that they are connected to identity development in very significant ways, but we want to understand more how. Can I have the next slide, please? So in addition to ideas of Mesirov and Korthagen and others, we've used prior research that has looked into patterns of change in student-teacher identities and also student-teacher identity development. And we are drawing on a piece by my colleague Katrin Ponvaliskis and myself. This is a longitudinal study in which we identified different identity clusters among student teachers. And these identity clusters are composed composed of the student teachers' conceptions of self-efficacy and on different levels of experience that they have. And we identified, first of all, a cluster that we call self-efficacious cluster, identity cluster. And these, the student teachers with who exhibited traces of this kind of profile express a sustained and relatively unambivalent intention to become a teacher. They know that this is what they want to do, and they have quite firm beliefs about their capability to manage as a teacher, and which may in some sense reflect the lack of professional experience, which also was a feature in this profile. So they might not have been exposed to that experience of being thrown out of their comfort zones. We also identified a cluster that we call the doubtful. These the student teachers with this kind of profile never had a strong mission to become teachers, and they questioned their chosen study program, provoking a constant uncertainty. And they also had a lack of professional experience, so in a way they weren't entirely sure about what they were going into, and this probably created part of their uncertainty. The third group, identity searchers, had reoccurring doubts about career choice, but they in this profile, what seemed to connect the students was that the practice placement experience was a turning point, and that sort of confirmed that they are on the right track, although they still weren't quite secure in the idea of becoming a teacher. And the final profile we called experienced realists, and these in this profile, the student teachers did not question their study or career choice. They had made this decision, some of them long time ago, and they were fully at peace with this idea of becoming a teacher, and they had reflected quite a lot about around this decision. And they felt very secure in their teacher identity and had a very realistic also understanding of what it means to be a teacher, and about their own strengths and points of development. So we have used these identity clusters or profiles in our study as a tool for analyzing the material. Next slide, please. So based on our really need and interest to understand student teachers' identity construction in the context where diversity, multilingualism, and social justice play quite a significant role in the program. So how do the student teachers conceptualize their professional identity and its development in that kind of context became the first research question. And the second research question was that we also wanted to look at the development, what kind of evidence or utterances or examples of change, development, even transformation there might be.
So what did we do? I will explain quite shortly about our methods. So we are investigating Finnish or the Finnish student teachers. They were 31 persons who gave their consent to take a look at their narratives. We were collecting their text from a compulsory master level course in teacher education, which is called Teacher Identity and Development of Teacher Identity. And they participated on a voluntary basis. And the assignment that they had was to, they started to read an article, a classic article about understanding teacher identity by Beauchamp and Thomas from 2009. And after that, they read the article and reflected upon it. They wrote a text on how their own teacher identity has developed during their studies. And it was specifically from the beginning of the teacher-student journey until the actual day of the assignment that they made. And it's worth to notice that this task was given in the beginning of the course, so the students had not that extensive theoretical knowledge of the phenomena that we would like to explore. We conducted the analysis with a qualitative approach, with an explorative and theory-driven explorative process. And first, we noticed that the student texts showed us partly similar or mostly similar identity clusters that Erika just told us about, and that were identified in the Pombalikes and Löfström study earlier on. And then we continued with analyzing the text on how the change was done and the reflection to the change that they have kind of experienced. And we validated also the interpretations, and the agreement in the cross-validation was 90%. 3 of the researchers took part in the analysis. And now I will give the floor to Marjo, who will tell you about our preliminary results.
Yes, I will briefly present the results of the analysis of and with 1 or 2 quotes. So this is the focus is on how the students in these identity cluster groups depict change and reflection. And as Erika told in the beginning, we have these 4 groups that were similar to their study, and then we also find a 5th group, and it is in the end. So this self-efficacy profile, the students express a change towards increased self-confidence in terms of their emerging teacher identity. They describe reflection as an important way of achieving the qualities of what kind of teacher they want to be. And one student described, and this is our translation from Swedish, "I think that the school in which you work will change your identity. I am optimistic since I notice that I reflect even more on my own behavior compared to earlier. Even if I feel that I have a strong need to educate myself further, I am positive towards my becoming role as a teacher. I am also ready to realize that my role will change and take new shapes when I enter a school as a new teacher." Now you can change the slide, Solveig. Then we have this doubtful student profile, and there were only 3 students, luckily. These students questioned their chosen career path, and they display doubts regarding the future as a teacher. The students also display a missing feeling of even an emerging teacher identity. And here 2 of these 3 students describe also reflection as something that leads to even more doubts. And here are 2 quotes from different students. And during our classes, now it's like classes at the university, I perceive that it is not me who is referred to when talking about class teachers, not even of becoming class teachers. I still see discrepancy between myself and the teacher identity I feel I need to develop during the student-teacher education, and the teacher identity that I feel I perceive among the teachers in the schools. And then another student says, in the article that they have read for this exercise, reflection is underlined as a tool to negotiate your teacher identity. But when you already are in doubt, I don't think it is a good idea to dig into your feelings. Now you can just, yes. And then we have a big group of identity seekers. It is 12 students. And in general, these students describe having a positive and enthusiastic attitude towards teaching, but they don't describe or depict a clear teacher identity. Some students also express a change from a positive, unproblematic stance towards a more complex emotional stance that involves anxiety. And then the subject teachers, who are quite many in the group, they display a strong commitment to the subject and an emerging teacher identity. Here are 2 quotes. One says, a student says or writes, there is a huge difference in my level of knowledge today and 4 years ago. but I do not feel that this change has had an impact on my identity. The identity changes surely while you develop as a teacher, but for me, the steps feel very small and are hardly noticeable. I do not feel as a working teacher. I still feel like a pupil in the classroom. And then another student writes, at the beginning, I thought that I will be an extremely good teacher. Now I have a much more complex picture. It is not that simple that I thought. So this student displays this change from a very positive, unproblematic stance towards a more complex picture. And then this experienced realists profile, characteristics for them is that they do not question their career choice. They have made their choices based on sufficient information. They also have experience in teaching, working as a teacher, or they can have been working in other branches. They feel secure in their teacher identity and they trust their ability to manage any situations professionally. And here is one quote. Every accomplished course has given me more security and I can discuss pedagogical problems with my colleagues in my part-time job in school. I have read and listened to new research, so I am able to tell my colleagues about the research at the University of a city, and that feels nice. I have also a better attitude and a wish to teach subjects that I did not use to teach before. So this education has brought something new for the student. Now you can change. Now we come to this mission-oriented that we found in our data. There are 5 students, and these students, like these experienced realists, they express a strong confidence in their own abilities and a strong feeling of the career choice as the correct one for them. But they also emphasize characteristics combined to their mission in a broader context and towards society. So here is one quote. I am now confirmed that working as a teacher is my cup of tea. I want to support and share knowledge to pupils and to students so that they get the tools that they need in order to develop into full members in our Finnish society and help them find their path in the world that is becoming even more complex. So now I give the floor to Erika, I think.
Thank you. This is the last slide and just sort of a wrap up. So we did identify those same 4 identity clusters than in the prior research, but also, as Marjo just pointed out, we identified a distinct mission-oriented identity cluster. And I think this is interesting in light of Korthagen's onion model of levels of change in teacher identity, because according to that conceptualization, mission is the very core of teacher identity, and it's sort of the mission guides or filters the identity, and based on that there are outer layers in that onion that sort of through which the previous layer is filtered, and the mission is the very core. So I think that was interesting that in our data we kind of identified this very core type of identity cluster, and I don't know. we don't know, but it could be an indication. This is the question we ask ourselves: is this an indication of the role of the teacher education's program, or sorry, is this the result of the teacher education's program on an emphasis on diversity, multilingualism, and social justice, which sort of cuts across the whole curriculum, and it's present there for the duration of their studies. So that's we think that that might give a direction for the mission, but is this result dependent on that profile? We don't know, but it's possible, and I think this is something we would like to dig deeper into. Also, another highlight we want to point out is that acknowledging the uncertainty and even agony that comes across in some of these descriptions that identity work may raise in students is very important, and especially I think that teacher educators need to ask themselves, we need to ask ourselves that do we prepare student teachers sufficiently for dealing with that uncertainty and dealing themselves through that uncertainty so that they can find sufficient reliance on themselves. I mean, probably you can never have the full perfect ideal teachership, but at least to feel sufficiently prepared and sufficiently strong in terms of professional identity. And so we are interested in how to handle and how to deal with this agony and help student teachers to work it out and accept it also. And we have also reflected on the functions and the uses of these clusters. So they should not be treated as some kind of labels, but in a way we talk about displays of identity, displays of identity, but not categories or labels that we want to put on the student teachers, but rather as theoretical but also practical tools with which student teachers might be facilitated to reflect on where they are in terms of teacher identity and where they have been and where they might be headed. So yeah, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this interesting presentation, and that puts on the table some really key issues. So, but I think if there is any short question or clarification, we can take that. Otherwise, I think we proceed. I think it was a clear and fine presentation. I think we catch the main point. So I leave the floor to, we stay in North. I leave the floor to Annelie from Sweden. It seems not to be the case. So then I propose that we give floor to the third paper. Is it you, Mojca, who will present?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, welcome, please.
Okay, good afternoon to everybody. So we prepared a presentation and I will try to share it with you now, okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, let's see if, okay.
Yes, it looks
So
okay, but I think...
Do you see one slide or two slides?
Two.
Okay, what about now? Okay, I will repeat the action because I expected just this. It's the same, right?
Yes.
I don't know how to delete because I have the whole day problems with my computer.
So then I think you stick to the one you had.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Okay, let's see. Probably, yes. Okay, maybe
now you are right.
Right.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon and welcome to Ljubljana again. Right, our faculty is organizing this wonderful conference this year. So I'm going to present a research. We have done it in the last year with two of my colleagues. They are unfortunately not able to join us. Maybe Neža will join us later on. What is this research about is actually it's a part of our job. We are teaching educational psychology and we are very involved in teaching, in learning of prospective teachers or of student teachers. So we started last year research on how our students, prospective teachers, learn, which kind of learning strategies they use and so forth. So the aim was to enhance the learning by learning firstly how they learn, right? And then epidemic happened. So now the story I will tell you is about how our students learn, or how they report to learn during the pandemic, which learning strategies they use, how they feel the situation and themselves in the framework of pandemic, and how positive they remain besides the situation which is negative and awful and so forth, right? So the comparison between student teachers' perception during the first and the second wave, it's the topic of our research, because when we finished the first research in the spring, last spring, we didn't know that also the second wave will come and narrow the academic year as it has done. So we developed 3 research questions, and I will stick to them when presenting the research findings and the whole research. So as I said before, we explored the emotional interest of our students. So we asked them how do you like this distance education, because they remained at home, right? The whole academic year here in Ljubljana is online, or is actually, it's still ongoing process. The second one was to explore deeply how our students feel and evaluate different aspects of self-regulation in distance education. And the third one was a little bit exploring the relationship between the COVID experiences, positivity as one of the main personality orientations, and the self-regulation strategies used in distance education. What was the background? I will show you. We have a lot of literature, but maybe just for forming an idea, we used these 2 thoughts about effective self-regulation, which has also impact on coping with situations like pandemic, which are provoking high levels of stress. And the second one is also about protective factors in these situations, which we choose, for example, this positivity as a personal trait, which can be some kind of protective factor in the framework of pandemic. What we have done, we have performed an empirical study. Actually, we developed a survey composed by different questionnaires. But firstly, I suppose you would like to know who were respondents of our study. So participants were in the first wave, approximately 300 students from our university, first cycle. So you can see on the graph, on the picture on your right, the picture below, that they were students of different study programs from our faculty, and that they were also mixed by their experiences of being students. So we involved freshmen as well as older students. We used 3 different instruments for our study. We translated and used the online self-regulated learning questionnaire from Bernard and others. And this instrument measures 6 different self-regulation strategies. We measured, or we analyzed before the factorial structure of this instrument, actually of all instruments we used, so that we were pretty sure that we have some kind of good instruments, right? The second instrument was the positivity scale from Caprara and colleagues. And as I already said, it measures some kind of positive attitude or positive orientation, life orientation. The third instrument was COVID-19 experience questionnaire. This questionnaire was adapted slightly from work of our Croatian colleagues from Zagreb. And we use this instrument with their confirmation, of course. So we measured with this instrument perceived change in distance learning in 10 different aspects, but always connected with learning. Then perceived adequacy of distance learning, and we finished this questionnaire with open-ended question to explain perceived adequacy of distance learning. So now in the next few slides, I will show you results of our study. So we collected the data online, and I have to say that the sample of our study, you know, it's always like that when you do online studies. You really don't know who is on the other side, so we have to take in consideration also this fact, right? As I said, we have done some preliminary analysis, and then we analyzed the results in a statistical package as well as with content analysis. So what are the results? Following 3 research questions. Let's see, the first question was, in general, how do you like distance learning compared to regular study? So face-to-face study at the faculty. And here we had a 5-point rating scale as a response format. You see, from 1, it suits me much less. To 5, it suits me much better. So on your right, you can see the statistical test of differences between these ratings in the first wave separately, and then in the second wave we have done this one sample t-test to check these differences. And as you can see, the differences in the first wave were statistically here and practically significant, which means that students assess that distance learning in pandemic suits them much less than in regular situations, right? But this was not the case for the second wave. It seems that in this period, students already adapted somehow to the situation. And here we have also statistical confirmation. So neither statistical nor practical these statistics didn't show that there would be some kind of deviation from normal, right? At the end, we have also checked the differences in general between two independent samples, because students from the first wave were one group of students, and in the second wave were probably other students or the same, because we didn't know, right? We didn't so we didn't follow them, but we just took these two samples, and the difference was significant. So it's true, you see, the first wave was more impacting the experiences of students as the second one. Let's go further. So we ask students regarding this question also more open question about why do you think, why you are more narrow towards distance learning or regular learning. What are the reasons for or not? And as you can see here, this is just a summary of content analysis, that organization of time was perceived by students, by majority of students, as very positive experience of gain of this pandemic. So they reported a lot of experiences about how good is regarding the organization of time, studying from home, so on distance. On the opposite, if you see social reasons in the same table, you can see that they reported much more items or reasons why the pandemic and studying from home or on distance is more negative experience. So it's nothing special. We have encountered this result also in other studies, but still is really very interesting, right? And informative for planning the study activities in the next academic year. The second question is related to different aspects of distance learning in pandemic compared to regular studies. So we have again the comparison between first and the second wave of pandemic. And as you can see, the rating scale down, you see 1 means much worse than usual and 5 means much better than usual. Okay, so organization of time and space, you can see in the second wave, it was much better than usual. For example, in comparison to concentration in study work, the last item you see on the picture, it's even worse than in the first wave as a perception, right? So we have done some statistical analysis and found out that from 10 items assessing different aspects of students' life during pandemic, 7 were even worse perceived as worse, or in the first or in the second wave, right? So as I mentioned before, organization of time and space, yes, it was even better. It seems that students learned a lot about organization during pandemic, but if you see on the contrary, concentration, motivation, communication, efficacy, in-depth study and so forth, so these items were perceived efficient. Here we have, yes, concentration and communication, right? It's perceived even worse as it was. And if we go a little bit further to check the different domains of learning strategies, in distance learning, we can see that here we have them from self-evaluation to goal setting, that actually we can observe some differences, but statistically significant were in 2 domains, in help seeking. So in the second wave, the situation was improving. So they were reporting to be able to help seeking, and on the contrary, they didn't pay so much attention to time management. It seems that they learned how to do it in this last year. Finally, we can see the correlational metric between different variables we included in this study. And here you can see from number 1 to 6 different domains of learning strategies measured, and comparing the correlation between them in the first wave and in the second wave, it tells us that they are more or less using some similar patterns of learning strategies. But what is more interesting is when we see the more general orientation through personality characteristics, we can see, if you pay attention to number 7 and 8, that positivity, like a general positive orientation towards life, is correlated with, these are not very high correlations, but still they are, and they are significant, with all aspects of learning, right? And the same happens with the number 8, so different aspects of COVID experience. They are correlated with learning strategies in the first wave. So it seems that these 2 variables, first one is the single one, the second is computed one, that they have something to do with learning in crisis, in stressful situation. When we adapt a little bit, you can observe that these correlations are not significant anymore, right? Neither for positivity, neither for general experience of pandemic, right? Of course, they are correlated between them, right? Because positivity is connected with more positive experience of COVID situation. So what we can conclude? First, there are pros and cons to distance learning in pandemic, and we cannot just say it's completely clear. Pandemic is really worse, is a really very, very awful situation. It is actually, but we can go through reasons students report it, and we can understand that the situation is more complex. The second one is that we can conclude that students adapted somehow in the second wave. They reported about better organization of time, space, and study, higher quality of study and study products. But they reported also on less communication with fellow students and less concentration while learning or while studying. With respect to self-regulation learning strategies, as we said already, they reported on more help-seeking strategies, which is good. This is very important, right, to understand how you can get help when needed. And the second one, less time organizing strategies. So this is also expected. The third one is that positivity and experiencing COVID situation, these 2 variables are related, or we can say that they are more influential for learning in the adjustment phase than in the stabilization phase of epidemic. But of course, we are doing also further research to confirm this hypothesis. So here we are, and I would like to open the floor to develop some take-home SMS. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mojca. Thank you. Is there any short questions to Mojca before we proceed to a more general discussion? Yes, Ann-Britt?
Yeah, thank you for this presentation. Maybe I didn't follow everything, but did you say that they were freshmen? That means that they are beginners or something in this?
Yes, thank you. So yes, they were students from the first to the fourth study year at first cycle, right?
But do they then have studies from campus based learning to compare?
Yeah, yeah, you are right actually. But you know that also the last spring when the first wave was taking place, they were students in the upper higher schools in Slovenia, right? And also in that role, they were homeschooling. So because the schools were closed, and they all day study from their home. So let's say they practice this distance learning.
Yeah, but did they have any experience from campus-based learning, from what you call traditional organization of teacher education?
No, the first students from the first year, no.
Okay.
From the second wave, right? Besides the, in contrary, the students, first year students from the first wave sample, they had, because they have been at the faculty for the first semester, and the epidemic happened in the second. But actually, it's very important methodological question. Thank you. Yeah, I would like just to say hello to my colleague Neža Podlogar, who joined us, and she is also a co-author of this research.
She's most welcome. So then I propose that we open the floor for the more general conversation. So here we have had 3 papers. The first one who's focused on the formation of the identity as a kind of a key element of teacher education. And the second one who worked with logbooks as tools for that type of learning. And this third paper that sort of puts focus on occurrences in a particular situation, namely the pandemic situation. So I open the floor for questions and discussion, please. I see no hands, so I take the opportunity as the chair to be curious about things I was thinking about. Yes,
sorry.
Lea, yeah?
Yes, I think that Erika Löfström has a hand.
A raised hand,
Thanks.
yes, yes. Well, perfect. Thank you, Lea, for pointing to that. Erika, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Björn. This maybe relates more to the previous presentation. I just wanted to reflect a bit anecdotal evidence from our teacher education program, and because well we've looked into experiences of different cohorts of student teachers, but it is mostly the feedback and the discussions with the students that I'm now thinking of, and discussions with colleagues. And we seem to have a mutual observation that the second year students are somehow the most troubled cohort during this time. And we've been thinking that what is the reason for this, that because I guess the hypothesis had been all along that it would be the first year students who come in as new, and they don't know so many friends, and they may come from all over the country, and it will be difficult for them to start the studies under these circumstances of complete distance. But actually, it seems that this is not the case. Maybe we have put so much more effort into securing that group that we thought would be at risk, that they would find their place and get a good start for their studies. And it's possible that in that process we haven't put that much effort into the students who already were with us during a face-to-face era. and so I was just wondering that do others see similar trends, and how do you deal with that? And maybe Mojca, as you had different cohorts, I'm maybe a question to you, that would the second year students somehow come across as a special type of group with who is dealing the most, somehow being most in agony about the situation?
Oh, this is the hard question, you know. This really is a hard one, and also in my opinion, it's related to the level of the epidemic, right? The pandemic perceived, because here it's in Slovenia, probably it's a different situation than in Sweden or in Italy or in other countries where a lot of people passed away because of that and so forth. And it's we have done some other analysis, you know, for example, exploring the coping strategies in this situation and so forth. And Neža helped me. We found some differences between younger and older students, right? But not exactly for the second year. And actually, I am not familiar with this troubled second year.
There were, like, in the first wave, we compared the years of the study, but there were not like big differences between first, second, third, and fourth year students.
Yeah.
Like, this was not a very important moderator of their experience or of their self-regulation strategies during distance learning. So they were quite comparable in that aspect.
Mm-hmm.
But in the second wave, was it the same pattern?
In the second wave, this is quite a fresh result, so we didn't yet do this research, but I think this is an interesting thing to study as well.
Yes, I hope we will handle it because of the number of respondents. You know, it's always this is really interesting. But you know, now we are, because we first time we faced it with this problem, right? Because this is, and we are continue to explain that this is not a normal distance learning situation, right? Because, and you are probably very familiar with distance learning, right? But in Slovenia, distance learning actually was not the case, because Slovenia is so small, you know, and when we were studying this distance learning, it was not distance learning, it was distance learning in extreme situation. It was something like, you know, plan B. And maybe because of that, we got these results, right? And I wanted to say that always depends on how you ask and what you ask, right? Because we are familiar with another study on student population, not student teachers, right? But in general, students. And I think that Neža helped me, 800 students from Slovenia participated in that online study again. And it turned out that 1/4 of the population of the sample had thoughts about suicide in the pandemic, right? So, and it's interesting because we didn't ask that question, right? We searched for more general reactions and so forth. So it's really interesting how to approach the problem, and you know how to ask, how to question the problem to see then what is going on.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think it's valuable to think about the terminology. I wrote a paper on this in fall, and I used the term emergency remote teaching because when we talk about distance teaching and those things, that is a kind of planned activity, which is sort of usually you have spent a lot of time in designing how the learning are supposed to occur, but now it was like, you know, some kind of earthquake, and suddenly we had to do things differently. So, may I pose a question to Solveig and others with the first paper? I think it was really interesting to follow you where you started out with those four, this typology of the 4-1, and then you found a 5th one in the end. I was sort of thinking about those 4, and I was sort of thinking that, yeah, kind of hard to identify them, and sometimes I can sort of think that in the morning I'm one of them, and later on the day I'm another, sort of moving things there. But the point was more to say that I think when you ended up in the mission-oriented one, isn't that kind of the flip side of the insight of motivation, and that motivation is actually always the driving force in this kind of learning activities? What would be your take on that?
If I can start, and Solveig and Marjo, you can add. When you say it that way, Björn, it might very well be the flip side of motivation, or somehow motivation boiling down to something, and that something being the mission. In the model of those 4 profiles, we had mostly looked at teaching experience, the nature of that experience and the length of that experience, and also self-efficacy. So I guess if we would add motivation as a theoretical dimension, that would sort of help us to conceptualize this new expanded set of profiles. So thank you for that idea.
I think it is, you know, we have comparatively with Finland, we have some problems with teaching students leaving our programs, and when we look into that, we could just see that those who have more, I guess this is this group, the more mission-oriented group, because the context for you is that you have a profiled program who sort of puts social justice and other aspects in the foreground rather than something that sort of someone picks up during the way. It's a kind of, you have that orientation, and what we find is that dropouts, they are the one, or we could say those who stays are the one with more a mission-oriented identity, altruistic motives. They know why they are there, so to say. And I think that is an important observation, which I believe you point towards in this paper.
And if I can, I see that Solveig raised her hand just really briefly. I think that some of our students are rather aware of the profile issues, the social justice and diversity and this kind of things. They come with an awareness of those things, but not all of them. Mm-hmm. So I think we have both kinds of students. But Solveig.
Yeah, thank you. This was a really good comment, and I started thinking that the motivation, that's very personal, isn't it? But the mission kind of oriented, the students that we identified as students that could be mission oriented, that's kind of individual plus an approach towards society. So it's kind of, you know, a double interest, so to say. That's my thought about it, but it is a really good question, and I think we have to think about it. But I think that what we have seen in the texts, it comes quite clearly that they are quite proud about what they learn from the approach and the profile, especially when they explain about how they experience the practice period, and especially the older students that has been to the second practice period, which is the kind of an advanced practice period. They will soon be newly qualified when they go to the second practice. So I think that the mission kind of the new profile or the new cluster that we found is both on an individual basis, a motivation on an individual basis, but also towards the society, because they want to make a difference. Sorry, I talked too much now.
No. Thank you so much. Very interesting. And I just want to comment that, as you know, you from Finland, but maybe not all here, that in Sweden, we usually don't have those programs with a more particular profile in that perspective. And I believe that's something we should develop, because I think it's so essential for teaching. So I think you're on something very important there. Although I guess this kind of study you do, that would have played out in a general program as well. I don't think that's the background to my question was not the fact that you had this profile, but I think it adds into the picture in a very positive way. I would like to pose a question to Annelie or Ann-Britt on the using of logbooks, and I think it was briefly touched upon this kind of duality between using this this model for teacher students while they also use it with their students. Wasn't not that the case? And how do you understand that works? I guess my hypothesis would be that would have a powerful consequence of reinforcing sort of learning strategies by being sort of using this tool for oneself, and then in sort of one context, while using it with students in their program, so to say.
Do you want to say something, Ann-Britt, or shall I?
Well, I wonder if this isn't more your field, because I haven't been involved as much in this double thing. I've been doing more about the models we have and the specific either teacher education or secondary education. So I think you can better answer to this. But it was the idea when we created this scenario, this design, was to give the student teachers a model. But okay, go on, Annelie.
Yeah, I think about what to say, because it's I presented a paper yesterday on just that in Örebro on a conference, and I just want to, where shall I begin?
Yeah.
But it is some of the students that write essays say that they are inspired by the logbook they have write themselves as students. Sometimes it's they think, oh, it was a great idea, I try it, and sometimes it's, oh, I don't think it works quite well. I want to do something better with my my pupils. So they learn, as I say, in the end, both when it's great and they success, and both when they failed. So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Dear colleagues, I believe we are approaching the end of the session. I think we have had 3 very interesting papers here. I was sort of thinking that for teacher formation, this issue of identity is so crucial. And it's sort of interesting to think about how you sort of work with kind of 3 aspects of that. Sort of starts with the individual, and then you have to think about the context, which sort of have to interact with a particular kind of experience, intentional experience we would like to give a learner to learn, so to say. I think in one of Linda Darling-Hammond's texts, she sort of walk the way for thinking about teacher education backwards, starting with what are kids supposed to learn in school? And if you're supposed to learn that, what kind of experience do you need to have? And if teachers are supposed to be able to teach that, what kind of experience do they have to have during their period of training, etc., etc. And then you come back to those questions of identity, and the task in teacher education is, of course, to work with the formation of the identity. And I guess you used, Erika, the metaphor of the onion, and that gives you the idea of going inwards, but it's also a question of walking outwards in some respect. So I think that was really interesting to listen to, as was the paper on the logbook experience, because that's an important, as it was named, a boundary tool, kind of building bridge, identifying gap, building bridge between where I am, where I'm supposed to go, metaphorically and practically in several levels. And then we had this 3rd paper who sort of looked into the experiences during this hopefully very unusual year we have just shared, where everything was sort of put upside down, everything had to be done differently, or maybe not. Maybe we did something very traditional, but in slightly different modes. So we have to be careful with the perspective all the times, so that sometimes things that looks very differently or maybe draw on very traditional sort of way of thinking, and that's a way of how do we learn and how do we affect that with teaching, etc. So I think it was a very interesting session, and I wish you a nice evening, and we look forward to see each other again tomorrow. Thank you so much. Bye.